California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and people with final deportation orders, a strategy both parties have long supported, this administration is pushing mass deportations, indiscriminately targeting hardworking immigrant families, regardless of their roots or risk. What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before. On Saturday morning, when federal agents jumped out of an unmarked van near a Home Depot parking lot, they began grabbing people, a deliberate targeting of a heavily Latino suburb. A similar scene played out when a clothing company was raided downtown. In other actions, a U.S. citizen, 9 months pregnant, was arrested, a 4-year-old girl taken, families separated, friends quite literally disappearing. In response, everyday Angelenos came out to exercise their constitutional right to free speech and assembly, to protest their government's actions. In turn, the state of California and the city and county of Los Angeles sent our police officers to help keep the peace. And with some exceptions, they were successful. Like many states, California is no stranger to this sort of unrest. We manage it regularly and with our own law enforcement. But this, again, was different. What then ensued was the use of tear gas, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets, federal agents detaining people and undermining their due process rights. Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk. That's when the downward spiral began. He doubled down on his dangerous National Guard deployment by fanning the flames even harder. And the president, he did it on purpose.
Also turns out that when Secretary Hegseth ordered this deployment and carrying out those orders, he put all these troops into Southern California without federal funding for food, water, fuel, equipment. They were sleeping on the floor. They were sleeping on each other. It is a complete mess. Secretary Hegseth's repeated incompetence is next level. He needs to resign. And in terms of the Marine deployment, we should not be deploying Marines against Americans. Marines are trained to kill the enemy. What are they going to do at this protest? I mean, are they going to shoot protesters? What exactly is their role? They are not trained to do crowd control. They are not trained to handle these kinds of situations. They are not trained for law enforcement. So I asked the president to rescind his orders. He's being needlessly provocative and inflammatory. And Chairman Aguilar is right. He is losing on his big, ugly bill. It is going to give massive tax breaks to billionaires, and it's going to be funded by the greatest healthcare cuts in U.S. history. So do not fall for the trap that the president is laying here with his shiny objects he's trying to do. Focus on how he's messing up the economy, messing up your healthcare.
I want to remind everyone tonight, if Democrats had their way, they would let all of this continue. They wouldn't intervene on the 101, which if you know L.A. at all, if the 101 is blocked, the whole city is strangled. And the surrounding parts of the city, of the main city, of the downtown, L.A. County, the ripple effects across the region, I can't overstate it enough as someone who's lived in L.A.
Well, thanks for having me. First and foremost, watching these scenes, I just want to remind the general public that anyone who goes out and is protesting in a way that is not peaceful, law enforcement that is
I'm still with you. I will stay dialed in.
Local and regional law enforcement will hold people accountable. But as far as the court case goes, you know, this is a case that is going to make its way through the system. The preliminary injunction was not granted, but the judge did order a hearing for Thursday. So this is going to be heard on Thursday. Both sides will make their arguments, and the governor, the attorney general, the state of California feels very strongly that the calling of the National Guard.
You can't defend when people start setting things on fire, or they start damaging buildings, or going after members of law enforcement. That's not free speech. That is not peaceful protests. And I'm very supportive of immigration as well, too. We have to find a way forward. The two must be true at the same time.
And if Senator Fetterman or anybody else is concerned with law and order, we should be looking at one of the most law-breaking agencies and administrations that we've seen in the United States.
I think she's referring to.
Thank you, Congressman Gomez, for putting this letter together and bringing us together this morning. I listened in traffic. Mind you, for what they had planned for the weekend, they had blocked off a whole lane of traffic. So it took what takes 8 minutes took a half an hour to get here. Happy birthday to you, too. But in any event, thank you. And I could hear by my staff's phone what others have said, and I associate myself with their remarks. Here's the thing. The president has said he can't send in the Guard without the governor's permission. The president has said, I don't know if I have to obey the Constitution. I hope the president would read Article 10 of the Constitution, and I urge all of you to do that as well, because Section 12046 of Article 10 says that the National Guard cannot be called up by the president without the consent of the governor. So that is the basis under which he's proceeding. That is the basis on which the governor of California is suing. Really, I think it's really important for people to know how this came to be. Raids that they were holding, situations where if your case is not settled, if you're still out there and haven't had a resolution of your status, you have to, by law, report in on a regular basis. You are obeying the law. And now they are deporting people for obeying the law. So as others have said, it's a distraction. It's really stupid, because we understand that we are a nation of immigrants. We want people to have a facilitation of their status. We do not want any violent protest, and that would be addressed for those who are acting violently. I do want to say two more things. One is, and I say this as a former party chair, when there is a large gathering of people, the anarchists see it as an opportunity and they move in. So always have to be careful whether you see a burned car or a broken window or whatever it is. It may be the exuberance of the moment, but it may be the anarchist setting in. I heard one of the former police chiefs of Los Angeles speak about this on Sunday. Secondly, and you know this to be true, and I haven't seen it really reflected so much in the press, in a bipartisan way, on January 6th, with violence against the Constitution, against the Congress, and against the United States Capitol, we begged the President of the United States to send in the National Guard. He would not do it. Not only would he not do it, when law enforcement people were being harmed, some later died, he would not send it in when an instigation that an insurrection that he incited was causing damage to those assigned to protect the Capitol and the Constitution that day, to accept the results of the Electoral College. That day, he didn't do it. He forgave those people. Now his people want to raise money for them, and yet, in a contra-constitutional way, he has sent the National Guard into California. Something is very wrong with this picture. Inconsistent in his actions, contrary to his own statement that he couldn't, of a year ago, that he couldn't send anyone in without the governor's consent, any place, and in violation of the Constitution. Thank you again, Mr. Gomez, for being here.
What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
Listening to President Newsom, we had heard earlier today he'd be delivering this address at 6:30. Obviously, there were some audio issues on his part. He started it again, but a powerful address saying that President has chosen theatrics over public safety here in Los Angeles. He spoke about authoritarian regimes begin by targeting those least able to defend themselves, and he spoke about the president not wanting to be bound by law or our Constitution.
California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived. He's taking a wrecking ball to our founding fathers' historic project. 3 co-equal branches of independent government. There are no longer any checks and balances. Congress is nowhere to be found. Speaker Johnson has completely abdicated that responsibility. The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. Look, this isn't just about protests here in Los Angeles. When Donald Trump sought blanket authority to commandeer the National Guard, he made that order apply to every state in this nation. This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived.
Gavin Newsom didn't create this situation, right? This situation was created by Donald Trump, who...
Enforcing laws.
Well, no, actually not enforcing law, doing something that hadn't been done in 60 years, which is bring out the National Guard, something that Donald Trump himself had said before was unconstitutional, to use the National Guard without the authority and approval of that state's governor. I want to go back to your initial question about what authoritarians do. And I don't live under Gavin Newsom, but I lived under Daniel Ortega, and I fled communism, and I fled authoritarianism. And what we are seeing all over America is a man who is not just trying to be a dictator for one day, is a man who's acting as an authoritarian, a man who's giving himself a parade on Saturday for his birthday, like they do in North Korea and they do in places like Russia. A man who is attacking anybody who opposes him and weaponizing government against universities, against law firms, against anybody who dares speak up against him. A man who said he was going to go against criminals and gang members, and who is going after mothers and fathers and tias and abuelas and people who've lived here for 30 and 40 years and have built lives and are good, decent, hardworking people. Many of them who are here under some color of law. Because if you're showing up to an immigration court, you're not here undocumented. You're here under political asylum. You're here under parole. You're here under TPS and going to a check-in. So I, for one, I'm very happy to see somebody that isn't afraid to speak up and call an authoritarian an authoritarian. And if it's Gavin Newsom as a result of what's happening in California now, I welcome it, because I have been so thirsty for somebody that is not cowardly bending the knee and selling out to Donald Trump as he does all of this to America. It's not just to Latinos.
Gavin Newsom. Law enforcement from all over Southern California has been deployed here in downtown LA to keep things locked down. We've seen officers from LAPD and neighboring counties, Ventura County, Orange County, Santa Barbara County, Pasadena Police, Hawthorne Police. Basically every law enforcement agency in Southern California is here. I want to show you behind me right there. That is the federal building, and those troops and vehicles that you see, those are the National Guard troops that were deployed here by President Donald Trump in contravention of Governor Newsom's wishes, over his objection. The backdrop to all of this, Ali, is all of the people who were detained by ICE in these large-scale operations over the last week or so. From what we know, ICE's numbers that they're giving us are about 118 people total, but we know very little about who they are. DHS has released some information about a small number of them, 11 or 12 of them, that they say are criminals, in some cases violent criminals. But one of the reasons we don't know much about the rest of them is because lawyers tell me, lawyers that represent people pro bono here in deportation proceedings have told me that they have had a really hard time accessing these people. They are supposed to have access to the immigrant detention facilities, to the places where these people are being held in order to offer them representation in deportation proceedings. They have been prevented from reaching these people on several occasions. We did hear at a press conference just immediately before we went to air, Ali, from the families of some of the people who were detained in the Garment District factory on Friday. That was actually the raid that really triggered this protest, this response. I want to play you a little bit of what one of the daughters of the men detained had to say about the situation. Take a listen.
I demand the process of my father and the dozens of workers that were detained that day to have the right to speak to a lawyer and be representative how they're supposed to be representative. My family and I haven't had communication with my dad. We don't know nothing about him. We want justice.
What DHS has said about this in terms of people trying to access both the Metropolitan Detention Center, which is right behind me here in downtown LA, and other ICE facilities, is that they're keeping people from entering these facilities because of unrest, because of protests. It's a matter of safety for the attorneys, for law enforcement, etc. Lawyers are pushing back against that, saying that they should be given access to these people. As lawyers do slowly get access to the detainees throughout the course of today and the days to follow, we should get some more information about the people who were detained, whether they had criminal records, whether they were, as DHS has been presenting them, threats to the public, or whether they were just people doing their jobs at the work sites that ICE and other federal law enforcement targeted in these operations.
Let's turn to what's happening in California now and the clashes between police and protesters after ICE raids in that area. The president has called people taking to the streets insurrectionists and deployed the National Guard. Do you think that was an appropriate response by the president?
I do not think so. I think the president should allow local and state law enforcement to do their job to protect public safety. People have a right to peacefully protest. People cannot use violence, and anyone who's engaged in violence should be held accountable. But that's what the president has done, is thrown gasoline on a fire. He is enjoying the political spectacle for his own political purposes. But as Governor Newsom and others have said, state and local law enforcement are the appropriate parties to make sure that we protect public safety and hold people who are violating the law accountable.
We were just reporting with our reporter in Washington, Yamiche Alcindor, that the administration is looking at potentially more raids and saying there could be more scenes like we're seeing in LA, in that area, around the country. How fearful are you about where this could all be headed?
Well, the administration has shown that it's prepared to abuse its authority in order to pursue its political agenda. And this is a time for all Americans, regardless of political party, to stand up and say that we have to protect the Constitution, we have to protect due process, we have to protect public safety. And that's what local law and state law enforcement officers do every day around the country without Donald Trump bringing in and nationalizing state National Guards.
Secondly, and you know this to be true, and I haven't seen it really reflected so much in the press, in a bipartisan way, on January 6th, with violence against the Constitution, against the Congress, and against the United States Capitol, we begged the President of the United States to send in the National Guard. He would not do it. Not only would he not do it, when law enforcement people were being harmed, some later died, he would not send it in when an instigation that an insurrection that he incited was causing damage to those assigned to protect the Capitol and the Constitution that day. to accept the results of the Electoral College. That day, he didn't do it. He forgave those people. Now his people want to raise money for them, and yet, in the constitutional way, he has sent the National Guard into California. Something is very wrong with this picture. Inconsistent in his actions, contrary to his own statement that he couldn't, of a year ago, that he couldn't send anyone in without the governor's consent, anyway, and in violation of the Constitution.
Good afternoon. My name's Danny. I'm a veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, serving in Vietnam 1969-1970 in the U.S. Army. You know, when I was in the 101st, we had a motto called Rendezvous with Destiny. I think events of the recent days indicate that we as Americans are going to have a rendezvous with destiny. Who are we as a country, and what values do we stand up for? You know, you don't send Marines, you don't send military detachments into the streets of America to confront citizens of this country. That's unconstitutional. Therefore, I'm asking that the President, the Secretary of Defense, call off what you're doing. It's wrong. You don't send the military into the streets. You know better. You know what's going to happen. Marines, military personnel are not trained in the use of due process. They're only trained in a couple of things: destruction and death. So I'm going to tell you that what you did today, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, is sending a signal to America that you don't care about the citizens of this country. Your political motives are going to drive us into a place we don't want to be. So I'm going to say to you that are watching this video, what are your values? What's your rendezvous with destiny? What do you consider that you want to see out of what's happening right now? Who's driving the division? Who's causing this? We must stop it. We depend on our congressional leaders. We just depend on our judicial leaders. We depend on the executive branch to do the right thing. We've had a history of, you know, maybe not so perfect background in America, but you know what? This is wrong.
And then one of you had the nerve to say, this is about standing up for peaceful protesters? Your guy just sent the Marines to Los Angeles to confront protesters. You sent the Marines, and by the way, I don't know if you've seen the pictures, they are sleeping in squalor. They are sleeping and living exactly the way you would expect them to sleep if their commander-in-chief called them suckers and losers. These pictures are horrifying.
They're training for non-lethal weapons and for crowd control and for civil disobedience. It's happening right now because they haven't had it before. It's a total of 4 days. 4 days that they're training for this purpose. Our Marines did not sign up to repress civilians. They didn't sign up to be used as pawns in a political agenda. The decision to deploy Marines to Los Angeles is an abuse of power. Full stop. The state of California, as has been said, neither requested the National Guard nor the Marines. The president sent them anyway. It's all about power. Let me be very clear, as my colleagues have said, we all support the right to peaceful protest. It's essential for a healthy democracy. We strongly condemn the agitators who are committing acts of violence. Their behavior is completely unacceptable. And they're giving people like Stephen Miller exactly the images that they want. And that makes it even easier to then pick a fight over political retribution. But by sending the Marines to Los Angeles, the president is fanning the flames of a very delicate situation. He wants the protests to spiral so he can crack down even further. I'll always support our service members. And the vast majority of Marines are not trained for this. They're training for non-lethal weapons and for crowd control and for civil disobedience. It's happening right now because they haven't had it before. It's a total of 4 days. 4 days that they're training for this purpose. It's dangerous. It threatens the very apolitical nature of our armed forces.
You've got to be kidding me. My name is Rob Connect. I'm a 21-year U.S. Marine Corps infantry combat veteran. I spent 9 of those years at Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton. At 18, I raised my right hand and swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. There's also a really important Marine Corps recruiting poster that I've seen many times that says that Marines are the vanguard of democracy. Well, democracy means government of the people, by the people, for the people. So I never thought that I would see the day that we would sink to persecuting our own fellow American citizens, making us the enemy. Well, Marines do 2 things really well: death and destruction. We wreck the place and we make people unalive. So tell me why we are threatening to send our most deadly shock troops into a U.S. city, Los Angeles, the city of angels, to protect who? I appreciate what Mike Levin has been doing for us, but Mike can't do it by himself. I'm calling on all veterans, you, American patriot who has bled for this flag, step out of the shadows, remember the reason that you raised your right hand and you swore your oath. As it always has been, history is written by those who step up to answer the call of our nation in its moments of weakness. You are needed now.
This whole Marines being deployed to LA to deal with protesters. It's fucking insane. I don't care who you are, that is insane. Why? Marines are devil dogs. Marines are badasses. We are the guys that come in, we get the mission done, we destroy things, and we get on out of there. And we do not police, we do not take care of protesters. And you're putting up this fighting force made to destroy against protesters who are literally just trying to keep their fucking families in America.
This moving in of federal forces, the federalization of the National Guard, unnecessary, counterproductive, the Marines just over the top. And so, you know, we got to keep calling out Donald Trump. He doesn't have the authority. We don't think no proper justification for this move. So I appreciate Attorney General Bonta going to court. And if you look closely, governors across the country have spoken up against this. Attorney generals from across the country are part of this suit because if Donald Trump gets away with this, this is coming to every corner of America. I shared that with my colleagues at lunch today. We all need to be concerned. This is not just a Los Angeles challenge.
And I think this issue of using the military to go after American citizens is one of those things I think is a very, very bad thing. Even to say it for political purposes to get elected, I think it's a very, very bad thing. Let alone actually doing it. When I was in the White House, for that matter, DHS, I was, originally the conversation would be, Mr. President, that's outside your authority, or, that's a routine use. You really don't want to do that inside the United States. But now that he's talking about it as I'm going to do it, it's disturbing.
It's so striking how quickly things can change here on the ground. Right now, we're about 300 yards away from the Federal Detention Center. Officers are here, the protesters on this side, but that's the detention center all the way down the street. You can see that heavy police presence. The reason some people decided to get rowdy after a day of peaceful protests, and the police just weren't having it. As a bus believed to be carrying detainees arrived at LA's Federal Detention Center, protesters blocking the entrance were met by pepper balls, fired to push them back. It was a brief moment of tension in an otherwise calm day. This is what it's like on the dividing line in downtown LA. Peaceful protesters here, part of a group of hundreds of people in downtown. And right here, we have National Guard troops standing at the ready. Most protesters tell us they're not looking for trouble. Among those we spoke to, Enrico Green, a Marine combat veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. People across the country look at this and say, LA is burning. We need Trump to send in the military, send in the National Guard, the Marines, whoever, to get it under control. You say what?
I say that LA is not burning. LA is protesting, LA is standing up for our neighbors, and LA is showing solidarity.
Today, crews attempted to clean up from the latest round of protests, which last night started peacefully and ended turbulently. While scenes like this are being broadcast prominently around the world, here's some context. It's all happening in a small part of downtown L.A., at and around City Hall and the Federal Building, where detainees from ICE raids have been taken just a few blocks in a county of nearly 10 million people. As for the skirmishes, police and public officials here say they have it under control, but federal reinforcements keep coming. 700 U.S. Marines to join more than 4,000 National Guard troops. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass tells us the extra help is not welcome.
When it comes to the National Guard, you say they're underutilized or just basically not working.
I'm saying there's nothing for them to do. They are guarding a building. Okay, that is fine. But why would you bring in more troops when even the ones that are here have nothing to do?
Yeah, so Maurice, compare yesterday, if you would, to what's happening today, and also who is doing the actual arresting?
Yeah, the arresting seems to be being done by the LAPD. You know, this thing seems to be taking on a rhythm. The day builds slowly, and then things get more rowdy as the night goes on. Police seem to have found their rhythm with that when it comes to pushing people back. And so the difference yesterday, people were near the federal buildings. Today, they're a good several hundred yards away. So we'll see what the night brings. People here aren't exactly happy, and there are rabble-rousers, as you know, who also join the crowd, and we'll see what happens, John.
Okay.
I need you guys to go over there.
So it's, you can see, Jake, it's a little chaotic. So what they're trying to do is...
You guys gotta keep walking.
We're going to keep walking. We're going to keep walking. And then I want you to take a look over here. These are the officers in Suburbans. And then we're trying to weave our way through the next wave of officers. But you can see, I mean, there's press parked on the sidewalk because when today started, this area into the Metropolitan Detention Center was completely open. I hear you. I hear you. And so this is how a street is cleared. The LAPD is creating a line to try to make the people who are protesting and demonstrating, watch out, come this way. I think we're okay here.
Ma'am.
Yeah?
Please, I need you to move, please.
Are you moving all these as well? Okay. All right, we're going to keep moving. So, the issue has been...
All right, we're having problems with Karen Law's audio there. We're going to check in with her. It looks like she is...
Police. Press. He's press. He's with me. He's with me. He's with me. He's with me.
I have my verification. I have my verification.
Here.
He doesn't come through. You do. Sir. I have to go with you. Okay, go. Are you grabbing me?
No, I didn't touch you. So wait, okay.
I need you guys to go over there.
So it's, you can see, Jake, it's a little chaotic. So what they're trying to do is...
You guys gotta keep walking.
We're going to keep walking. We're going to keep walking. And then I want you to take a look over here.
I'm glad the president has a strong hand in this.
Mr. Speaker, you guys are condemning the violent protesters in LA. Is it hypocritical given the president pardoned the violent protesters on January 6th?
Look, no, I think there's a clear distinction between those two. We've seen what's happened in LA in the early 90s and in other times when these things get out of control and they burn whole city blocks down and shut the place down. You have to stay on top of that. You cannot let it get out of control. And I think federalizing the National Guard was important. I think if Marines are necessary to maintain order, we have to do what is...
But what's the difference? You said there's a distinct... What's the difference between the violent protesters on January 6th?
Everybody wants me to relitigate January 6th. I'm not going to do that. There's a very clear distinction between the two. The people who broke the law and destroyed property met with the proper consequences on that. That's what we're trying to be intellectually consistent about this.
What sort of authorities do you think the Marines should have there on the ground? What sort of authorities?
Maintain peace and protect property. They're protecting federal property and personnel, and that is a very appropriate and necessary thing to do, and I applaud the president for doing it.
Thank you, sir.
Before we discuss the current status of the Navy and Marine Corps, I want to make some comments on the deployment of Marines and National Guard law enforcement operations in Los Angeles. The issue is not, is there lawless behavior that can be controlled by local law enforcement? You either believe in a federal system or you don't, where a governor requests National Guard or doesn't, and you either believe in a civilian military division or you don't. Now, President Trump has addressed this topic in September of 2020. Look, we have laws. We have to go by the laws. We can't move in the National Guard. I can call insurrection, but there's no reason to ever do that. Even in a Portland case, we can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor. I'll set aside all the ad hominem partisan attacks and just say this. Senator Cotton brings up the example of Little Rock. President Eisenhower, Republican president, did federalize the Guard in that instance. Why? Because it was the governor that was violating federal law. There is no suggestion that Governor Newsom is violating federal law. In fact, he said, arrest me if I'm violating the law. And yesterday, the chief border agent for the United States said, there is no cause to arrest you. You are not violating federal law. And so the right balance in this instance is to let a local official, mayor, governor, seek assistance if they need it. We wouldn't even be having this discussion if he said in federal law enforcement, FBI, DEA, federal law enforcement. We're having this discussion because the president, in an unprecedented way, without a request and over the objection of the local elected leadership, has sent in the United States military, and that is unprecedented.